What's up, everybody, and welcome to week 7 of the Illuminerdi's post-credits MCU recap show. This one is entitled WandaVision Weekly. My name is Richard Nebbins. You can follow me at rnebbins on Twitter. And once again, holy crap, what an episode we had to talk about. If you guys were with me last night for our first MCU watch-along party, thank you guys so much for joining us. I had an absolute blast watching the episode, obviously with our editor-in-chief, Brax, Caitlin, Brandon. We will be doing that every single week for these new Marvel shows, with WandaVision finishing off next week, going into the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki. You'll be able to watch it along with us and see our reactions and see some chat with us. And again, thank you guys so much. We had about 120 views last night, and we're only hoping to get that up going in the next few weeks. So thank you guys to everybody who joined us last night, and what an episode to join us for. I mean, this episode, it's called Previously On, is the title of episode 8 of WandaVision. I don't know if this is like my favorite episode of WandaVision yet, but it is damn close. This one, for the first time in a while, took us nearly completely out of the sitcom world. After 6 of the last 7 episodes, we're fully into that. And this episode gave us plenty of explanation into why that is. We start off, obviously, with the backstory of our newly revealed villain, Catherine Hahn's Agatha Harkness. She is, in fact, this is a tease going back to episode 1, if you've been paying attention. She was a part of not just the original Salem witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts in 1693. She was a part of the witches' Salem witch trials, where they were trying her if she was a witch, and then they tried to use their magic to get Agatha's magic out of her. She ended up being so powerful that she killed off everybody, which is probably her sisters and it would look like her mother in that event, which was over 300 years ago in the MCU timeline. And then we go back, obviously, to her basement in the present day with Wanda, in this Westview reality that obviously she has messed with and screwed with. And Wanda is, trapped in there trying to figure out what to do. She can't use her magic against Agatha because, she's finding out that Agatha is damn near as powerful of a witch, if not more powerful than Wanda is. And then Agatha just starts torturing her like crazy, trying to figure out how she made this whole reality for herself. She's throwing her around the room, just being absolutely insanely powerful. And then this episode is interesting in a couple of ways because it doesn't actually take a lot of the plot to the current day MCU, what's happening in Westview. It takes a big old long trip down memory lane. In this episode, we don't get any of a few characters. We don't get any of Darcy, Jimmy Woo, Monica Rambeau, barely any Tyler Hayward. But we do get a whole lot of Agatha and Wanda. I mentioned that we got started off with Agatha's backstory with the Salem witch trials and everything. Then we go into Wanda's complete history as it's been told by the MCU. We start off by going into her earliest days with her and her brother Pietro and their parents living in Sokovia. And here is where we find out why this entire reality of Westview has been shown as a sitcom. We see Wanda and her parents and Pietro going through their stuff and trying to figure out what to do for the night. They're speaking in Sokovian, and it turns out that they are learning to speak English through watching all these old sitcoms. You see stuff like Bewitched and Malcolm in the Middle and a couple other of the sitcoms that they have referenced in this show directly before Wanda pulls out the big guns, pulls the special sitcom DVD out of place, the Dick Van Dyke Show, which is her favorite, which Pietro obviously just can't stand at this point anymore because apparently she always goes back to that. But then it turns out, as they're watching the Dick Van Dyke Show, having family time together, that is when the bombing hits their house, kills their parents, and then we see the direct look at the Stark Industries missiles, just as Wanda and Pietro described it in the events of Avengers Age of Ultron. So this movie ties right back, once again, to the events of Age of Ultron. You know, they're hiding under the bed, trying to figure out. Agnes pulls the adult Scarlet Witch out from under there. And then they go into her first experiments with the Mind Stone, which was either during or pre the events of Captain America, the Winter Soldier, where she and Pietro were being experimented on by Hydra with the Mind Stone. Once again, it says they volunteered for it, as Wanda mentions in there. You know, she's going into this room with Loki's scepter, with the Mind Stone, and now the Hydra guys don't see this, but it's really interesting to see it from Wanda's perspective that the Mind Stone comes out of the scepter, it floats toward her, she's looking at it, and then it affects her. It looks like that is what gives her powers. And then the coolest thing about that is when it turns yellow, when the blue stone explodes into the yellow, you can see this faint image of what the comic book accurate Scarlet Witch is going to look like. Now, that costume has been teased in posters. It's been teased in interviews. Elizabeth Olsen obviously rocked the comic book accurate costume in the Halloween episode a couple weeks ago. But I have a feeling that next week, we're going to get like a full-on new Scarlet Witch costume, as was teased in that image. So we get that backstory, and then we also get to see a little bit more of her story with Vision specifically. It looked like between the events of Avengers Age of Ultron and Captain America Civil War, when she was at the Avengers facility, she described to Agatha how that was her first home with Vision that they made together. And then, you know, they're obviously watching the sitcoms together. Wanda's still trying to get over Pietro's death, which obviously has hit her so hard, as has been seen throughout this series. And, of course, the interesting thing I forgot to mention from earlier in the episode was that Catherine Hahn's Agatha basically confirmed that this version of Pietro, the Evan Peters Quicksilver version of Pietro, is not the real Pietro, because her brother's body is laying on another continent, as Agatha said. So that just basically confirms that Evan Peters is not playing a version of Quicksilver. He's playing somebody totally different. We have no idea who it is. I can't place it. We've heard rumors of Nicholas Scratch with the connections to Agatha Harkness in the comics, but that will be a huge mystery to figure out once next week comes. So then after this whole trip, we see what happens early on in this series, likely what Monica was describing in the whole 9 days before the events of everything that started in WandaVision. We see Wanda after the events of likely Tony Stark's funeral. She is busting into Sword and, you know, trying to get Vision's body. But here's the interesting thing about it is that Wanda initially reveals that she wasn't trying to bring Vision back to life. She just wanted to get his body and give him a proper burial, a proper funeral, because she felt he deserved that and she deserves that, obviously, because of, you know, the tragic death that he experienced in Avengers Infinity War when Thanos, not only when Thanos ripped the Mind Stone out of his head, but before that when Wanda had to kill him herself to try to stop Thanos from getting the Mind Stone. So she goes in, and this whole thing is clearly manufactured to make Wanda look like the bad guy. And not only that, to try to make her do something that she doesn't want to do and that Sword does want to do. She ends up meeting director Hayward, and he shows her what they are doing to Vision. They have completely dismantled him. He is in pieces. His arms and legs are in one place. His torso's in another. His head looks exactly the way it looked when he had the Mind Stone ripped out of his forehead in Avengers Infinity War. And Wanda can't believe it. I mean, she is absolutely distraught over what they are doing to him. Hayward basically explains it away, saying that there's no way that they're going to bury $3 billion worth of vibranium, and that he wants to bring the world's most powerful sentient weapon back online. Obviously, Wanda takes offense to that because she doesn't see him as a weapon, and I'm pretty damn positive that Vision didn't see himself as a weapon either. And she is still on this track that she just wants to bury him. And that's when she breaks into the window. She breaks the window apart, flies down into the lab. Everybody's about to shoot her, but then Hayward calls it off. And then we get, one of the most emotional moments of this series so far, and a few of these emotional moments right in a row. We see Wanda trying to feel Vision's head, the way she did actually in Avengers Infinity War when she was messing with the stone in his head when it was hurting him. But she was trying to feel him, and she said, "I can't feel you," which is direct reference to when she said that in Infinity War, when she said, "I just feel you," and then when Vision said the same thing to her right before she killed him. And then she just leaves the sword facility, drives away from the facility in New Jersey, which this is where it gets really super interesting. I mean, side note, Wanda driving a car is definitely one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Just thinking of a woman who's probably one of the most powerful Avengers, one of the most powerful people in the universe, and she's just driving away in a Buick. But anyways, so she's just driving around. It seems like she kind of picks Westview on maybe accident or just kind of stumbles upon it. But then we get a look at the real life Westview. We see Herb, we see Jones, we see Mrs. Hart, all from the shows, all from the sitcom eras. And this just looks like a town that has fallen into complete depression. And it is just absolutely heartbreaking seeing what this town is. And then the whole time Wanda's driving, she has this envelope next to her. And then she pulls into this lot, which is a totally empty lot. And there's no house there or anything. And she pulls this thing out from Vision that it's basically saying that this is where he wanted to settle. And it's got a little V in it with the heart. And that's when Wanda just absolutely loses it. She completely breaks down, falls to her knees. She's crying her eyes out. And then this is where it gets, like I've been saying, super interesting. That she's been saying for the last few episodes that she doesn't know how all of this started in the first place. How she built the entire town of Westview, how Vision thinks she was controlling everybody. There is an energy that comes out of her that basically just explodes all over Westview. You see it surrounding her, and the effects in this are absolutely amazing, by the way. All the magic stuff, I mean, they clearly saved a lot of the special effects budget for these last two episodes, and I can't wait to find out what they do in episode 9. But anyway, there's this huge burst of energy that comes out of her and completely remakes all of Westview into the 1950s scenario that we saw at the beginning of the season. And then a little bit of side note, kind of a cool Easter egg, one of the posters that changed on the wall, it said "Snap" on it. Obviously a reference to Thanos and, what happened when he snapped away half of all life in existence. But anyways, so Wanda is doing that, and she completely remakes Westview into this black and white 50s setup. And like she said, she didn't steal Vision's body. It looks like she completely recreated him out of thin air. I mean, that's probably why he can't leave the Hex, because he is a part of the Hex itself. He's one of Wanda's creations that she created out of thin air. And then an interesting theory that I've come up with about that is that we saw her experiments with the Mind Stone. They obviously gave her powers. We've known that since the events of Age of Ultron, which came out almost 6 years ago. But what I'm thinking is, what if the Mind Stone actually ingrained itself into her being so that she is now like part of the Mind Stone? Maybe she can recreate it, or maybe she can, recreate life with it. I mean, she could have the possibility to really, truly bring Vision back to life if she got that powerful from the Mind Stone. But we see that. We see the real Wanda looking in on everything as Agatha is showing her. And then, Agatha has been teasing this whole time that she has her kids trapped, that she has Wanda's kids trapped in her basement. And then we see at the very end, Wanda's running out of that door in the studio, which I love the fact that they showed the studio in this. She runs out of the studio, and Agatha is in her full witch villain getup, and she's got both of the kids by the necks. And, she is teasing Wanda about, how she made this entirely new reality with her crazy powers, and she basically used it to make breakfast or dinner, which is a reference to episode 1. And then we get something that we have been waiting almost 7 years for. We first saw Elizabeth Olsen in the end credits scene, or the mid-credits scene, sorry, of Captain America the Winter Soldier, after she had already gotten her powers when she was first experimenting with them. She has not been called the Scarlet Witch in the MCU. Director Hayward even teased that fact a few episodes ago when he was talking to Jimmy about how she didn't have a funny nickname or anything. But then Agatha reveals this whole witch mythology that, she has gone through over the last 300 years, and that she officially, dubs Wanda the Scarlet Witch. I mean, it is apparently a myth among, witches and magicians of all sorts. And that is where the episode ends, with Agatha calling Wanda Maximoff the Scarlet Witch. And then we get that post-credit scene, which is absolutely nuts. We go back outside the Hex with Sword. They apparently have recreated a version of Vision, which is actually straight out of the comics. It's called White Vision, which is a villainous, kind of dead inside version of Vision. It seems like they used just any materials they could find, the strongest materials that they could find. So this version of Vision is one of the classic, actually villainous characters from the comics. He has this emotionless, dead inside psyche that he's used to, terrorize the Avengers before. And I mean, it's straight out of the West Coast Avengers run. This show has been absolutely nuts, bringing in classic comic characters, introducing Monica Rambeau and giving her powers and everything as Photon, bringing Agatha Harkness into play. And now it looks like they are setting up this White Vision thing for an ending run in WandaVision against Wanda and Vision. I don't know what's going to happen next week, but Hayward has been working all season to try to bring Vision back to life. And it seems like he may have finally done it. So we are in for an absolutely wild, wild ride in this series. Now, my last segment, something interesting I noticed watching this episode. There were a few shots in here that we had actually seen before, but we hadn't seen in this episode. And I want to take you back about a year to the very first Super Bowl trailer that Marvel premiered for their Disney Plus shows. It's the one that included The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, and also WandaVision. There were about 4 shots in there that were in this episode, that were in that trailer that premiered over a year ago. The Wanda welcome home scene, when Vision is looking at Wanda in their 50s getup. There's a short little glimpse of Wanda in her street outfit from the present day in black and white. Same thing when she's warping the reality again with Vision in black and white. And then when they're sitting on the couch together, that one turns out to be when the real Wanda is looking back at them. So Marvel did a fantastic job. I mean, these shots didn't come until the 8th out of 9 episodes of WandaVision. And that's where they're first coming in. And that was teased over a year ago. So just absolutely fantastic job to Marvel Studios. That's it for me for this week for WandaVision Weekly. We are in for one hell of a season finale with WandaVision. We've got, an Agatha and Wanda matchup to get to, a little showdown between them, maybe a Vision on Vision thing. We got to see where Monica comes in. And then we still have the major Luke Skywalker and Mandalorian level of cameo that we're waiting for. I mean, Paul Bettany has teased it's somebody that he's never worked with before. We still haven't seen it yet, obviously, because it's going to be a huge, huge MCU reveal. So that is coming next week, along with probably the longest episode of the series. This week was about 46, 47 minutes, including credits. And next week has got to be close to an hour with everything that's coming. It's been teased to be a 6-hour epic, a 6-hour story. Adding up the minutes so far, we've seen about 300 minutes so far. Divide that by 60, that's about 5 hours. So we're in for an hour-long episode of WandaVision to close off the season next week. And I absolutely cannot wait for it. Thank you guys so much for joining me on another week of the Illuminerdi's post-credits WandaVision Weekly show. You can catch me again next week when we do It's All Connected with Bryce West and Corbin Shanklin. And then you'll also be able to catch me live with the Illuminerdi next Friday night when we will be watching the final episode of WandaVision together. And I hope you guys join me for that. I cannot wait to see what happens. And thank you guys again so much for joining me. It's been a blast. Can't wait to see you guys next week. Thanks.